patiently waiting. We are ready to get started on episode 4, my fourth guest, and this is Shannon, y'all. So when I first
Hi,
started,
everybody.
I had it was a one man team, and I was on this journey, and I was building this group, and all of a sudden, I didn't know who was watching, but apparently there was a lot of people watching. One person in particular, her name was Shannon. And every single time any other groups are talking about fertility or just being lost or them being told that they needed to have alternate solutions to build their family, in walked in, and I was tagged to say, go see this group. They're going to help you. Girl, it's a space. And I said to myself, who is this girl that keeps tagging me in all this stuff? And so I made her part of my admin team. So the people that you have seen pretty much besides Freedom, Sherry, Keisha, now Shannon, they're all my admins of my group because they have anything that I ask them, they stop and do. Anything that I need, the level of support that they've given me since I've pretty much started this group has come from them. And so I just thought it was fitting that they all graciously, whether they wanted to or not, accepted this and decided to be part of this for me and putting their trust in me. I cannot thank them enough for that. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you guys to Shannon. And Shannon, we can start from the beginning of your journey and how you got started or why you got started.
Okay.
You just take it away.
Okay. So, pretty much my journey started, I want to say, October of 2017. I was then with a partner, was a guy, and we were together, I want to say, 2.5 years. So I was like, okay, I'm ready to have a baby. So it wasn't happening naturally. So I decided to make an appointment at my first clinic. And that was Delaware Valley Fertility Clinic. So I went into the appointment and I actually had my sister come, who was 8 years older than I am. So she was like, I say I was 36. So she was like 40 something, 42. So we both went to the appointment and they did the consultation and they did some lab work and then they monitored me right then and there. And after that was done, they pulled me in the office, me and her, and they said, well, it looks like you have a little bit of low, your eggs are very low, which you have diminished ovarian reserve at that time. My number was 0.23. So immediately the doctor said, do you have any young cousins or do you have a sister? And I said, well, this is my sister, but she's 8 years older. And they were like, well, that's not too bad. But do you have any younger cousins? And I was like, I do, but we weren't very close. So that wasn't really an option. But he didn't say I couldn't. He just gave me an idea that I would probably need a donor. So went to that appointment. I left. And I never really touched on it because I was still kind of young and doing a lot of traveling at that time. So we're going to fast forward to June of 2019. So by this time I was single and time was clicking. So I actually asked somebody I went to high school with, would he be a known donor? And he agreed and he said yes. So I made an appointment at another clinic. And at this time, I had decent coverage for IVF. So I made the appointment, went to the appointment, and met with Dr. Gutman, who is a very, very known reproductive endocrinologist for RMA, one of the biggest fertility clinics on the East and the West Coast. And she didn't really come out and say I had diminished ovarian reserve. She was like, let me take a look. Let's see what we can do. So did all my monitoring, and my friend, my partner, who was going to be my known donor, went to his semen analysis and everything. And unfortunately, he was shooting blanks. So I'm like, okay. So they was like, well, do you have another option of using donor sperm? So I was like, okay. She was like, here's your options. Here's a few clinics that you can buy from. I was like, oh wow, this bummer. So I swallowed that pill and said, okay, fine, we'll use a donor sperm bank or whatever. So we did. And I chose my donor. And in the interim, we were monitoring and doing all the testing for me. And both of my tubes were not blocked, so that was great. Moved on to more testing and monitoring and lab work. And I believe that was around January of 2020. And she said, things aren't looking too good. We only see 1 or 2 follicles. And I was like, huh? That's it? And she was like, yeah, we don't do anything unless you have at least 3 or 4 or more. I was like, okay. So she was like, you can wait and try back next month. We'll give you a month off, give you a break. I'm like, okay.
And how old were you at the time?
At that time, let me see, 2019, I was, I think, 37 and a half, 38. So really time is going. Oh, and also they did check for my AMH and it did not move. So it was still 0.23. So in the interim of me waiting, COVID hits March of 2020. So I'm in the healthcare field. I work at one of the biggest hospitals in Philadelphia. So between, I think, COVID and battling multiple jobs, battling with taking care of my grandfather with Alzheimer's disease, I had private patients that I used to go see at their homes because they could not get out. My body just rejected. So unfortunately, I didn't even have a period anymore. So I pretty much waited out because everything wasn't open and running at that point. Went back into the clinic and she said, we can give you something to start your period. And same thing, nothing changed, no more follicles, 1 or 2, couldn't do anything. So they said we could put you on a list for donor embryo. I said, okay. And one of the biggest questions was, well, how long will it be before I get a call? And she was like, well, it could be 1 or 2 years. I was like, 1 or 2 years? Like, that's a long time. So I then called my gynecologist and asked her for her opinion. And she says, well, don't always go to the first man. Don't always agree with the first man. So she said, make yourself another appointment at another clinic and go from there. So from there, I saw Dr. Goschel, and he works for Mainline Fertility in Philadelphia. So I made the appointment, went, same thing, all over again, lab work, monitoring. And he pretty much said, well, maybe we could do an IUI and let's see what happens. So I tried. I didn't even try. He was like, oh, no, this is not going to work because your FSH was very high. By this time, my FSH was 30 because, again, my body's thinking it's going into menopause. So I'm like, so what now? He says, well, you can do donor embryos or you can buy donor eggs. So again, I went into research because at this time I had IVF coverage, but didn't know the full extent of the coverage. Pretty much I needed to know if it covered donor eggs or was it covering donor embryo, whatever. So I called my insurance company, found out they do not cover donor eggs. So the clinic offered me, they said, again, we could put you on the list for donor embryos. I said, fine. So I went on their list for donor embryos. So now I'm like, what am I going to do? So being in all the fertility groups on Facebook, somebody mentions Delaware. Help me out, Sharonda. Delaware.
Derm.
Yes. So I called Derm, and their coordinator was Black, who I loved. So I called her, got in touch with her, made an appointment. And basically it wasn't just an appointment. It was basically just going to see, what kind of embryos they had and things like that. So I made the appointment, went down there, which was like 45 minutes. Yeah, about 45 minutes to an hour from where I live. And went there, had got assessed, and basically going through the motion, going through how much it was going to cost. And I was like, oh no. She was like, yeah, it'll be about $8,000. And I'm like, what? And that wasn't for two, that was for one. So I'm like scratching my head. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is unreal. So one of my coworkers who is also involved or was involved with a lot of fertility groups on Facebook, and she messages me and says, Shannon, why don't you go to Cooper Fertility? And I'm like, Cooper Fertility? So I'm looking it up. She was like, yeah, Dr. Check. You didn't know about Dr. Check? And I'm like, no. So apparently Dr. Check is a problem reproductive endocrinologist. He only takes women with problems like me and all across the board, people who have multiple issues with conceiving. So I called their office, made an appointment. So this is now January of 2021. So I called in November and my appointment wasn't until January. So they sent me a thick packet of paperwork because they're a little old school. So they sent me a thick packet of paperwork to fill out and fax it. They wanted my records. So I had to get records from the two clinics that I was at, Mainline and RMA, have them faxed. And any other medical records that I had to get faxed over. So go there. That was January, I think it was the 21st. It was right after Martin Luther King's birthday. So I went for the appointment and I was in his office for about 2 hours. And that was meeting him, talking to him, and going over his treatment plan. And he gave me pretty much a double green light, was like, you're fine, we'll work with you and let's see what we can do. So in the meantime, my FSH was, still very high. It was about 30 at that time. And they sent me for some kind of compounded medication. I can't think of it off of my hands, but they gave me the prescription. I had to go pick that up at a special pharmacy and take that for approximately, I want to say, a good month and a half to get that FSH down. And it finally came down. It was way under 10. So by this time, in between the monitoring, the lab work, the testing, fast forward, April of 2021, they found one great follicle. So I was able to trigger and go in through the egg retrieval with the one follicle. So I forgot to say, my donor sperm was at my original clinic. So I had to make a run and go about an hour about an hour to go get the sperm, bring it to my clinic that I was going to, Dr. Check, take the tank back to, yes, it was crazy that day. I forgot all about that part. So I had to drop off the sperm.
It's amazing that all the things that you black out when you're doing this. You're like, I'm just gonna pretend like I didn't even do all of this. Like, did I really seriously do that? Yes, I did. But
Yes.
Here we are.
Yes. So I had to go take the baby daddy to the clinic. So so my sperm was already there. So yes, I did the egg retrieval April 25th, and then it fertilized. It did well. Now Dr. Check only freezes or transfers at day 3. He believes the embryo does better in the utero. So I ended up doing a 3-day transfer. So that would bring April 28th. So April 28th was my transfer. And unfortunately, it was successful, but it ended up being a chemical. So I think my timeline is a little mixed up. I've been to so many clinics. So I think right before I got that transfer, because I reached out to you, Sharonda, and I said, RMA just called me and told me, yes, RMA just called me and told me that they had a donor embryo. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, so I signed for that just as a backup plan. I signed for that, and they told me I had 6 months to use it. So that was already on the shelf waiting for me. So after this transfer, that was my first one, I immediately called RMA and said, hey, I'm ready whenever you're ready or whatever. And she was like, okay, no problem. We'll call you in and start getting your body ready. And by this time, it was like maybe going on 2 months since I had the last transfer. So went to RMA, and this embryo was donor sperm, and the donor egg. She was actually a single mother by choice, and she was actually 41, and she had 8 embryos, and out of the 8, she had 1 child, and she had this, I think, 1 or 2 left. I forget. It's been so long. I think it was like 1 or 2 left.
In your clinic, and if you guys are just joining us, this is Mondays. This is our Every Shade of Infertility Talk, where I sit down with a person who shares their story. Today we have Shannon on, who's sharing her. She has a beautiful little boy, but we're in the midst of the journey of how to get here. And I think I recall you saying that they only gave 1 embryo at a time.
Yes. Yep. That's correct. That is correct.
If it doesn't take, you pretty much have to get back in line and start all over again. Started with us here, they already told her it takes 1 to 2 years to get the embryo. So if it don't take, you get back in line. So you could essentially be waiting another 1 to 2 years to get back in line.
Yep.
You have the patience of Job.
So we back at RMA. Body gets ready. Dr. Gutman, they do the transfer. And this is my timeline. So that transfer happened in July of 2021. So 4 days before that transfer, I meet my now wife, Charmaine. We met online. And one of the first things I asked her was, does she want children? And she said, oh yeah, I definitely want children. I said, okay. So we ended up getting into this conversation about fertility, and she knew I was transferring 4 days later. So she was like one of my biggest, she was on my team as my cheerleader to wish me best of luck. So I transferred that one. And same thing, it did not work, did not stick. So Mainline calls me. Yep. Mainline calls me and says, Shannon, we have 2 donor embryos for you. So she said, the coordinator, Terry, she's like, okay, we just need you to sign the paperwork for the FDA for, I don't know what all that, I still don't even understand that part of the process, but I signed the paperwork and I also had to pay $2,500. So by now, everything is still covered. Medication wise, I still had to pay out of pocket because I had already at this point maxed out all of my money for medications. So with Dr. Goschel, me and him had a talk, and I said, Dr. Goschel, I've already had 2 failed transfers. Why don't we do something called like a kitchen sink protocol? And he was like, okay. So by this time, he did a lot of lab work, extra lab work, testing NK cells, and he did everything. And everything pretty much came back fine. So he then put me on, he told me to buy the Neupogen.
Yeah.
And so when I bought the Neupogen, I didn't realize it was going to be very expensive. So I tried to call around and see if I can get a discount. There was no discount because for 1 vial, it was, oh gosh, I don't even remember.
I won't hold you. It's $600.
Yeah.
$600.
Yeah. So I needed.
It's a cool $600.
Yeah. So I needed 4.
Yeah.
So I purchased that. And then he also did the infusion, some kind of
Intralipids.
Intralipids.
Listen,
there you go.
We got the pros in here. They said, girl, we got you. Intralipids.
Intralipids. There you go. I had the intralipids. They came to my house because I work for a healthcare system. So that was all covered. The nurse came and set me up. I did 2 rounds of that. And then I did the first one. So that one was in October of 2021. It failed. So that is transfer number 3. So I took off a little bit of time, a few months. I still had 1 more embryo left there. So I said, okay, I'm going to give it another go. This time it was January of 2022.
And I just want to say, like, keep in mind, by this point, she's met me. We're all in the same group together. At this point, Keisha is now pregnant. I got pregnant.
Marita's pregnant. Just got pregnant.
Right. Marita, yeah, she just got pregnant. So she's around people who are like now starting to get pregnant in the midst of her storm. And Shannon never wavered. She cheered us all on. She was there for us despite what everything was going on. You would have never thought like this was, she just kept pushing, you know? She never ever complained. She was just like, well, it didn't work. We'll just go back to the drawing board. And I mean, I even like talked to her. I was like, I will give you my embryos. Like if I make it, you can have, and she was like, okay. I was like, you can have my embryos. Like that's how bad, like I wanted her to bring a baby home.
So we actually brought me and Farida were both at the same clinic. Her doctor actually had her own practice, but did everything at my clinic. So me and Charmaine actually drove Farida to her transfer and brought her home. And then a few days later, I went for my last one at Mainline and it did not work. So I'm out of embryos. And that was, January 2022. So I was like, okay, time for me to take some time off, recuperate. And in April, I gave, no, I'm sorry. In March, Charmaine took a job at the hospital in Jersey. And the first thing she looked at was the insurance coverage for the fertility. And it covered everything, 100%. So that's part of the reason why she took the job, because it had the coverage, because she was like, we're not giving up. You know, we just got to keep going. I was like, okay. So once she started in March. And then fast forward to July of 2022. So she said, you know what? Why don't I try? Now, remind you, in April, Charmaine had a partial hysterectomy, so she had never thought she would be able to have children. So they only took her uterus. So she was all healed from her surgery, and she was like, well, let's try. I was like, okay. So we went back to, since she works for Cooper, her insurance covers everything at Cooper Fertility, which is where Dr. Check is. So now I'm back in with Dr. Check. So she made her appointment we called in July, and they told her appointment was in September. But since she was a Cooper employee, they expedited her appointment. So her appointment was 2 weeks from the initial call. So we both go in, and they're like, oh, you're back. Oh, nice seeing you again. I'm like, yeah, this time she's trying. I'm like, I'm not trying. She's going to try. And they were like, oh, okay, cool. So they took her in. We went in for the meeting, of course, with Dr. Sheck. And Dr. Sheck, he keeps you in there for like 2 hours. So he was like, okay, let's see what you got. So they pulled her in. She was loaded. I'm like, remind you, Charmaine is 2 years older. Wait a minute, I'm 40. She's 2.5 years older than me. So she's 43, and I am 40. I'm 40. And they were like, you got a lot of eggs. I'm like, oh, okay. Sometimes, you hear a lot of eggs, but you're like, oh, they're probably not valuable. So, fast forward, we waited for a little bit, and then they started us in September, and we both had to be in sync, since we were doing something called reciprocal IVF, which is they would take her eggs, create the embryos, and then transfer them into me. So they both gave us birth control. They told us we'll have to be on birth control so we can we can make both our bodies compatible with each other. And
they're usually going to do this for fresh transfer. So if you're a recip, they're usually going to do this if you plan on doing a fresh transfer. And the reason why they probably were doing a fresh transfer is because of her age. Mm-hmm. So what they're afraid of is, because even though she has a ton of follicles, which basically turn eggs, is that her age, they're just very fragile. So the best thing to do is get those, and that's Check's protocol is, we don't want lab manipulation. We want it to just create them and put them right back in the body in hopes that you have a more successful transfer. So that is why they had to be in sync, because now she's going to be taking medication and Charmaine is taking medication to grow the follicles to fertilize. We're using Shannon to do the second half. So Charmaine does the first half, Shannon does the second half. So they take her eggs, get those together, and then she needs to prep her body to get those embryos that they created ready to go. Does it always work out
No.
that way? No, it doesn't. We just hope it does. We just pray it all works out. But that is just a little education on why they have to do that. Now, if she was going to freeze those eggs, then Shannon doesn't have to worry about that. She could have just went in whenever she was ready. But that is what you do for a fresh transfer, meaning that we're going to get those eggs, fertilize them, and put them in the body and keep on going.
Yeah. So so they sync our bodies together, birth control, and then General X, that one Medicaid. Oh.
Ganarelix.
Yeah. So she had to take, so in the midst of all of this, that's why I said God is good. You make friends along these journeys and along the way. And the first time I went to doctor check, I ended up meeting somebody through another group, and she had some leftover meds. She didn't live that far from me, and she had done a second round of IVF herself, and she had leftover meds. So we're gearing up. Here's going towards October, and they were like, okay, let's push it. So she started taking her meds, and I'm taking my meds, and she triggered. It was time for her to trigger. Now, she ended up having 35 eggs, but for some reason, her right side wasn't responding as well as the left, which was fine because we still had about 20 on the left side. So they pulled from the 20, they were able to get 17 out. 17 out. And then, of course, the numbers get smaller. So 17. And then 11 fertilized. And then 7 made it to our, as we'll say, the final stage. So 3 days after they were extracted, 4 were transferred, 4 fresh were transferred into me 3 days later. And that was in the end of October. So this is October of 2022.
And I'm going to explain why she was able to do 4. So again, we're going back to age. We're also going back to that these are day 3 embryos, which means they're not full blastocysts, which is may or may not be guaranteed that those 4 will even make it to day 5. So her age, they're not tested. So a clinic is not going to let you do that many. On tested day 5 embryos, they're not going to do it. But because she's older, they're basically saying your statistic wise, you may get 1 baby out of that. So that's why she's able to do that many. So if you're young or you're doing IVF or you're doing things and saying, well, Shannon was able to do 4, why can't I? That's the reason why. They are day 3. She's older. They're not tested. Statistics say she's not going to get 4 babies out of this transfer. Is what they're saying. Now, there's nothing impossible without God. There's nothing impossible. But they're saying we're more on the side that we're not going to get 4 babies. We may get 2 babies.
So that was 4. And then, of course, you wait your, 2-week wait. And it was a no-go. I was like, I'm used to this, used to this. So by this time, we're 8 embryos in. By this time, this is that last 4 made it 8 embryos that I had transferred from the start of the journey.
So how are you feeling at this point, knowing that we're 8 embryos in? I think you said 1, and just maybe 1 chemical. The rest
1
are pretty
chemical.
much
The
failed.
rest were just failed.
So what is your mental at this point?
My mental was mixed. Like, I'm used to this. And other part of me was like, I'm ready to quit. You know, I do want to let everybody know that, you know, my mom, poor thing, she's like, Shannon, you need to just, you keep putting your body through all this medication, hormone changes. My poor mom, she gave me a surprise birthday party for my 40th and had to give me shots because I think Charmaine wasn't here at that time or whatever. I don't know what happened, but she wasn't here. And for some reason, it felt like I wasn't given the progesterone correctly. I was just getting these lumps and bumps. And here I'm thinking I was a pro, but I wasn't a pro. So I decided to have my mom do them in the morning. And she was doing them one-handed because she had fell by doing, what is that? She was doing Uber Eats and trying to make extra money to surprise me for my 40th. And she landed in a cast on her arm. And she's trying to give me the shots in my butt. Oh my God, it was crazy. So yeah, so she was like, at this point, she was like, Shannon, you just need to just go ahead and adopt. It's okay. You know, maybe this journey is not for you. And I was like, you know, that was just like a stab in the heart. Like, Mom, it's not over until, and I told her it's not over until the fat lady sings. I'm just going to keep going. I don't care what you say. Now, I used to go to my sister, and my sister said, you know when it's time to stop. You know when to tap out. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to keep on going. So at this point, I had 3 more embryos left, and they were frozen. And there was, besides Dr. Check, he had a few other doctors in there. And Dr. Doherty was one of the doctors that was there. And I called the office and I said, listen, we need to come in and discuss some things because something's got to give. Like, why is nothing working? And he was like, okay, so come into my office. So we did. Me and Charmaine sat down and just had a talk with him. And he said to me, he said, well, how do you feel about having her get genetic testing? And I'm like, genetic testing? Why? I mean, she's 43 years old. I mean, the only thing I can tell you what her family has. And I said the mom had cancer. You know, the grandfather died of Alzheimer's. Like, she didn't have no real bad genetics that would keep her or keep the eggs from not taking. And I said the donor, all his stuff came back good. You know, there's no reason. And he was like, okay, no problem. He said, well, how about this? I have a solution. He said, what about, and he called Neupogen like some kind of generic name. And I said, is that Neupogen? He was like, yes. He's like, it's very expensive. I said, I already have it in my refrigerator. He was like, you do? I was like, yes. I said, the other reproductive endocrinologist had me on it. He was like, well, great. Well, I'm going to pull up this protocol and this is what you're going to do. And I said, okay. So this was, oh gosh, December. This was December. And he says, we're going to transfer after the holidays. And I said, I'm good with it. So he started me on a steroid taper. I forget the name of the actual steroid. And I went on the steroid taper, like first had to take 4 pills and then it had to knock down to 3 and then 2 and then 1. Oh my God, that protocol was so confusing, but it worked.
When you take it, your face like blows up. Like you get so round. So like everyone hates it because they do steroids a lot. We got Dr. Lee in here. She said it's prednisone. Again, thank you,
Yep.
experts in the group.
Hi, Latia.
Who can create their own protocols at this point. Yes, it's
Latia.
prednisone. It makes you blow up like a balloon. Your face is round. It's a very hard drug to get off of. Like it's very taxing to your body, but we do it for the end game.
The interim of those, I like the fact that, you know, he only recommended, I have it, you know, written down. It's like 3.25 ml of Neupogen, and you had to take it on the 7th day of the cycle. And then I was to take it again the day of the transfer. So I'm like, okay, here we go. Let's start. So before starting that protocol, I told Charmaine, we need to get out of here. I said, after this transfer, we need to go somewhere because I'm not staying around here. And she was like, okay. So one of my good friends lives in Texas. We went to Houston. So we booked some flights and after the transfer, you know, and everything. So I was like, okay. So started the protocol. And then I transferred January 4th, 2023. And went in just like any other day. But this time, you know, versus all the other times I have a big pineapple that I usually bring with me. I had the shirt saying knock me up and socks. And this time I didn't wear none of that. I just wear plain old t-shirt, plain old pair of sweatpants, and no ear, you know, can't wear any of that anyway. But I was just like plain Jane this time. I was like, you know what? Let me just go in regular and that's it. Last chance. So I say a quick prayer, you know, pray to my grandfather, because during the time that I was doing all the transfers, my first transfer, right before my first transfer, my grandfather passes away. So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to keep going, because he wanted me to have children. So I was like constantly trying to chase after that. So anyway, go in, do the transfer. And this time I was like, okay, I'm going to go and do the acupuncture right after, because the other transfers, I did include the acupuncture, but I did like 1 or 2 sessions before and I never went after. So I was like, you know what? Let me try something different. So I get one of my tests out and I was like, oh, she was like, what, girl? I was like, girl, I am pregnant. I cannot believe it. And from just that quick, it didn't even take that long. It was probably like 5 seconds. And both lines were there. I was like, oh, like that never happened. I was like, oh my God. She was like, oh my God, congratulations. I was like, yeah, but you know what? I don't know. I'm not sure. I was like in denial because, again, failure after failure after failure, and your mind plays tricks on you. So I was like, I'll just wait until I get my test and see what they say.
And it's sad that at this point you can't even be excited because you're like, this can't be it. You know, like this can't be real. Like you're just scared that it's going to be taken away, because you've been here before, you've seen this, and you know what's going to happen. So you can't even be excited in the joy of seeing a positive pregnancy test, because the next thing you say is, am I going to bring this baby home? And that's a real valid feeling to have.
So meantime, they called me. I forget her name. I think her name was Jennifer. She was like, oh, hi, Shannon. This is Jennifer from Dr. Check's office. I'm like, hi, how you doing? Same thing, you know, just really mellow and so used to them calling and giving you bad news. So you're not excited at all. So I'm like, hi. She was like, well, Shannon, did you test at home? I done lied. I said, no. She was like, well, honey, you are pregnant. I was like, huh? What? Really? She was like, yeah, your beta was, or HCG levels were 183 or 163. I was like, huh? I'm used to like 8 when it was a chemical. I'm like, okay, we're still in it. But this time it was like, wow. I was like, okay. So she was like, oh, well, we'll see you in a few days. Come in. That was a weekend. So no, that wasn't a weekend. That was Monday. I'm sorry. So she said, well, come in Wednesday. And I said, okay. She was like, we'll see you on Wednesday. And I was like, okay. So I said, okay, all right. So let me call Charmaine. So I'll call her. I was like, guess what? I was like, I cheated. And she was like, you cheated? I was like, oh, sorry. I meant to tell you I cheated and took a test at home and I'm pregnant. And she was like, oh my God. Really? I was like, yeah. I was like, well, they just called me and told me I was pregnant too. She was like, oh my God. And then she hung up the phone. She didn't even finish talking to me. I'm like, okay. So then she called me back. She was like, oh my God, I'm so happy. I'm so happy. So still in denial, just going with the flow. Wednesday comes, I go in the office, get the test done, and it pretty much doubled. It was 500 and something. I was like, wow, okay. Doing good. It's doubling. Still, and I'm going to be in denial for a while. I just didn't know. So she told me they told me to wait longer a little bit. So they said, oh, we'll see you next week. I said, okay. She says, we'll see you on Tuesday. So I said, okay. And by Tuesday, it was like 2,000 and something. I was like, wow, jeez, it's really doubling. I said, okay. So she says, we'll see you on the such and such for your ultrasound. I was like, okay. So I went in for the ultrasound and there it was. I'm like, oh my God.
It was a baby.
Yeah. So the doctor, she goes back in and measures and she's like, your cervix right now is a 2.8. And I'm like, huh? I said, well, what is it supposed to be? And she was like, supposed to be anything over 3, 4. So I was like, okay, so what do I need to do? She was like, well, we're going to put you back on progesterone, thinking I'm off of these darn vaginal suppositories. Felt like I was in them all the time. Felt I was in diapers the whole pregnancy. So, she was like, okay, so we will use the progesterone and monitor you in a week. And I was like, okay. So I go back in a week and unfortunately my cervix keeps opening. By this time it's like 2.6. So I went back the next Friday and she says, that's it. We cannot go any shorter than this. So what would you like to do? I said, well, I have no other choice but to have surgery, to have the cerclage. So I'm like, I feel like the devil was after me at this point. It's like I have to keep going through hoops and, bad enough it took me this long to have them. And now my cervix is opening. And after 4th of July, I started having loose mucus. And I was like, uh-oh. And that was, I think it was about 30 weeks. Yes, I was about 31 weeks-ish. And went in and she looked and she says, no, you're fine. Nothing moved. The stitch didn't come out. So you're okay. But she warned me. She said, if you have to come back to this hospital, you will be out of work. And me being the workaholic, I'm like, you ain't trying to get me out of work. I'm trying to work till I had his baby. So she was like, okay, I'm warning you. I was like, okay, fine.
And just so y'all know, we also warned her too. We also warned her because we was not playing with her. We asked her you would have thought they were our appointments the way that we was on her. We was like, so where we at now? 2 point something? We get stitched up or something? No, we gonna wait a week. Ma'am, we are here. We are here. This is the end game. Please stop playing with us and go. We bring this baby home. So not only did she have her doctors, she had me, Latia, Keisha, and Sherry. Like, come back here another week and say that you ain't getting nothing done.
Oh my gosh.
We kept talking about work. We said, if you don't go sit down somewhere immediately.
Yeah, it was crazy. And here we are. Fast forward, I made it 31 weeks. Here we are. Perfect. 31 weeks. And I'm like, by this time I'm so uncomfortable, and I'm driving in my car, leaning to the side. My legs are I look like an elephant. I mean, I was woof. I think I had the worst case of preeclampsia. So I go in for the appointment, and I never left. They kept me. They were like, this is it. You're done. No more out. You're not going home. You are here to stay. And I was like, can I go home and shower first? Because that's the first. Listen, ain't no shower like the one you got at home.
Listen,
so I was trying to shower and finish packing my bag.
Ma'am, you should have learned that from the other time where they told you could not go home and shower. So you should already been prepared not to go home. Every appointment, you should have been prepared that they was not going to let you go.
I was fine, get a little lonely at times. Charmaine works there, and she would come and visit. My mom, I actually had a lot of visitors while I was in the hospital, and finding little things to do. Go downstairs, outside, or get some coffee, play games, whatever. I was doing everything.
She says all that now, but she lying, y'all. We heard every day she was ready to break out of there. Don't let this story fool you. Don't let this story fool you. She was turning up every day. I ain't used to be laying around all the time. I gotta get up out of here.
I gotta get up out of here. I was like, I'm trying to go home. I was like, man. And at one point, what's funny? Because at one point, like, everything was all good. My blood pressure was good. What else was good? My kidney levels was good. And the doctor was like, well, you know what? You may be able, because they didn't really initially told me I was permanently staying. They just said I was going to stay until, them levels, got a little better.
No, man.
So, but anyhow, so as the days are going by, unfortunately, my kidneys were starting to fail.
Now, what I want to talk about, because what I did like, being, and being a part of your journey is the fact that you really, truly, especially when we're talking about Black women and being pregnant, I will have to say once you transferred, you had probably the best medical team, because they watched you and made sure that I felt like they took extra precautions because they knew about your journey, and they were like, we got to get to the end of the road. So talk about how you picked your medical team.
Well, one thing I can say is that guy who did I forget the doctor. He's Vietnamese. But that guy who did that cerclage, and he told me, like, he it's called a McDonald's stitch, and the cervix was open like this, and he went and he stitched all around it, and then he reinforced and went back and stitched it again. That damn thing was closed so tight that when they clipped it, it was completely shut, like it had never been open. I was like, wow. Now I expected to, that's why I said I really didn't understand. Like, soon as they clipped it, I thought I was going to go into labor like quickly, but nope. He did a phenomenal job. And it's so sad because there's actually one girl in this group who was pregnant. Me and her was pregnant at the same time. And unfortunately, she lost her little girl due to incompetency cervix. And I'm like, damn. I'm just blessed that, you know, my doctors caught it. You know, the surgeon, he did a great job. I pray every day because when they pulled the baby out and when I went back to the recovery room, they kept asking me. I mean, the last thing I remember is like me telling them I didn't feel good. I actually coded. And my mom said she watched the nurse, because my mom is in the medical field as well, and she watched the nurse, and the nurse, she never panicked. She said she never panicked. The nurse took the precautions, put me on the oxygen. By this time, I was on 6 liters of oxygen, gasping for air, and I really still couldn't even breathe with the 6 liters. So I was on oxygen for a while. I want to say at least a day and a half after I had Grayson. So yeah, I'm just blessed that I'm here and able to tell my story, because I didn't think my sister, yes, like she literally passed out. So they called the rapid response team for me. And then as my sister's walking out of the room, she then passes out, and they had to call the rapid response team for her. So we had like 60 people in the hospital room attending to me and tending to her because she had passed out. I'm a mess. So here I am.
Here you are to tell the story, an amazing story at that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And if you guys are walking in, this is Shannon. She just shared her journey. She transferred a gambit. We're gonna say what, 12? Let's see,
11.
11 embryos to get her baby boy. And what do you have to say?
Peach. Amen.
What would you say to some woman who is in a similar position of you, and I think someone posted today, what would you say to them to keep going? How do you muster up the strength to keep going after this?
What I always tell people is, what is your end goal? What is your dream? Do you want to be a mom? Because if you want to be a mom, you will never stop. You will just keep going until you get to that point, until you be successful. Like I said, I was willing to just keep going. And I said, if this wasn't going to work, my next, in fact, Charmaine laughs all the time. I was like, I guess we're heading to Mexico, because that was my next stop. You know, a few ladies in the group used Mexico. I was going to hit them up like, hey, give me the ropes to Mexico. I'm actually in that IVF group, and I, you know, still buzz in and out of the different groups and stuff like that. But yeah, Mexico was on my next stop. So if this didn't work, I was heading to Mexico. But yeah, I would just tell them, just, you know, what is your end goal in life? You know, what do you really want? And don't give up. You know, the main thing is you need to be around positive people. just dive into these groups. Some of the groups can be very negative and you kind of just like, ignore that kind of stuff. But for the most part, just try to dive in and, get with others who are struggling just like you are and just keep going. If it wasn't for, again, Charmaine, all of you guys, you, Keish, Tia, Farida, Jackie, everybody, Sherry, Ashley was there for us, my boss, Sandra.
And, it's something real that you said, your statement is you don't stop. You said, if this don't work, we're going to Mexico. If Mexico don't work, we're going to do this. Like, you still feel in the midst of going through things, even when you get your pregnancy. I'm in the middle of my transfer right now. And I think I said that, I think I was talking just on a regular day. And I said, if this don't work, I'll go get more insurance, or I'll do this, or I'll make more embryos. I'll do this. Like, you just always you just don't stop.
Yep.
Because if you stop, that you're going to quit. So you just know, like, you can't stop. I know this may be the end game, but I don't know for sure if it's going to be the end game. And that's the hard part of it, is not knowing when your end game is. You just keep going and going and going. And then you just have to keep doing it, because if I don't stop, then that's it. That's it. I don't have a plan.
Will I do it again?
No.
We are one and done.
We're going to open up the floor for questions. We thank you guys for joining us. I thank Shannon also as well.
Yes.
And if you guys have any questions that y'all would like to ask Shannon, I know that
You said what number transfer was Grayson? Grayson was number 6.
Number 6, but he was the 11th embryo.
Correct.
Because she transferred on the last few times. She transferred 4, and then she transferred 3. So we had a total of 11 embryos and 1 baby. And that's what we try to let women know. The reality is, when you're doing this, is that maybe it may take more than 1 transfer. It may take more than 1 embryo. It all goes down to the quality. And just honestly, sometimes it's just timing. And most importantly, it's a lot of God in here. So, we're thankful for science. We're grateful for science. But Shannon at one point was doing the kitchen sink on a lot of her protocols, and nothing was working. So I think it's just safe to say that it was just more or less timing, and it just being her time that Grayson was supposed to come into this world. And that's pretty much, all that we really can say when it comes to that, because God is amazing. He is truly, truly amazing. And I think all the stories, no. So all the embryos were not Charmaine's. The last 7 were Charmaine's. So Shannon had...
So the first one was my only biological one, which ended in a chemical. The second was from RMA. RMA gave me the donor embryo, which the egg donor was 41. And I think the sperm donor was like in his 20s. Then the 2 embryos, they were biracial. Actually, all 3 were biracial. I'm sorry. All 3 were biracial. The 2 from mainline, they both were in their 20s, which I didn't understand why they didn't work. But again, it's all about the medicine. It's the protocol. If the protocol don't match with, it just doesn't work.
I love it. Your story, I mean, I tell everybody because
Oh,
we
Keisha.
talked all the time. And we was like, how we gonna help Shannon? Because she keeps talking about one embryo and one embryo this and one embryo that. We was like, we gotta help Shannon get some embryos. This more than one, because this one ain't gonna cut it. But God has
I
a way
was so
of working
mad.
things out the way they are supposed to be, because if you have not seen my page, I posted. He is a beautiful little boy.
Mhm.
You know, around the sea of all of our admins, he is the only boy. He is the prince. And we were like, listen, we were all, even Shannon.
Yes, she did. She came through on them embryos, Keish.
She was team girl too, but God said no. You're supposed to be a boy mom.
Oh.
I did have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Because again, DNA. We talk about this DNA. He's not related to you and stuff. How is you guys' bond? I know that you have a partner, but still, we know you are a gestational carrier. You know, for her. How is your bond? Because I think he's asking for his mama.
Grayson is, you know, he's awesome. He shows us both love. He knows that we're both his moms. How do I feel that he's not biological? I feel like he is mine. I mean, there's no difference. I mean, I carried him for 9 months, or no, 8 months, whatever. He's mine. Ain't nobody can tell me nothing, you know. But I don't know if my grandmothers, I don't think they know like the whole verbiage yet. Yeah, I really didn't explain because I didn't feel like going through the whole thing. I'm like, so yeah, but he's all mine and Charmaine's. But he loves his moms. He's spoiled.
I think he's looking for his mom now. So who's next? On next week we have Neza. She is actually Filipino. She will be coming on. She used traditional adoption. She used an egg donor for her. So her first daughter is traditionally adopted. She'll talk about that. She's going to talk about her donor embryo journey, egg donor journey for her second daughter. And then she's also going to talk about her next steps because she wants baby number 3. So she's in the deeps of that, and it's going to be a different way of building her family as well. So again, the gamut is being run with Neza because she did it all. She can talk about it all. She can talk about the adoption. She can talk about donor error. And I think this time they're doing double donor. So they're not. So this one is not biologically related to. So one is related to her spouse, and then the first one is not related to them at all. And then this third one that she will carry will not be related to any one of them when she gets done. So she's going to be an amazing story. I just checked in with her. She's definitely on board. So I will start her promos later on this week so you guys can get a snippet of what she is. So yeah, that is what we have going on for next week.
Wow.